but essentially what was going to underlie any major growth was going to be the quality of the educational experience, or as we came to say, engagement of students in learning across the curriculum and co-curriculum. So learning was the foundation, and in that view, then anyone who was a part of that learning contribution was also a part of this larger effort. A second perspective is what Estella Ben-Simon has called the equity frame, and that's the idea that we can pose problems in ways that emphasize student deficits. And when we do that, not only are we providing a disservice to students, but we are also posing problems in ways that are insoluble for our institutions. On the other hand, we can pose those problems and those questions in ways that imply institutional accountability and responsibility. So posing problems in that way was a very important perspective for us. A third perspective, I'm going to say, is an institutional change perspective. Now, when we think about student success and particular strategies, the first thing that we instinctively go to, and for good reason, is the prospect for impact on students. But the other dimension that we wanted to be clear about was that we wanted to make an impact on the institution for the very long term. We wanted to think about the structure and culture of the institution. And so when we would take any particular category of concern, I've used academic support as the example in this case, and we thought about all the possible strategies associated with that, we would array them on the spectrum. And our objective was to see how far up the line we could drive the strategies. In this particular instance, what we arrived at was a comprehensive learning center. Comprehensive. This was the place where faculty would walk up the steps in order to improve their teaching and learning, to do course redesign. Walking up those same steps would be the students who are doing all kinds of things to improve their learning effectiveness, including particularly active and experiential learning. So it is where we were concentrating much of the work around undergraduate research, service learning, and so on. Now, it doesn't mean that we didn't do the strategies farther down the line, but we wanted to see how far up the line we could drive things so that we were not only having an impact on students, but on the institution as well. Fourth perspective was a simple one. It was to say, we came to the conclusion that no one strategy, no two strategies, would essentially make the difference that we wanted to make. We wanted to make a major difference, a quantum leap, not a marginal change. And so when we thought about strategies, we used the prior analysis and said, this is the array of strategies that we want to implement. Highly comprehensive, for sure. Now, the plan went ahead. It was approved by the president, the provost. It was vetted by a group of about 65 people in the end, 7 committees. And so on that basis, we'll give ourselves credit for moving a little bit off the margin in this way. And now we were off to implementation. So in the years between that and 2011, we were implementing strategy, and the ways we went about that were important as well. I've talked about the president being the initiator, the person who said, give me a report. Well, the president has played a very important role, but it's been a supportive role. So the president and provost have talked about the importance of student success. They have intervened at critical points, but they have not been directing the effort. I also talked about the fact that we started with just 3 people working on this, but any of us here would know that 3 people can't make major change. So the effort from there was to, in a variety of ways, develop coalitions. And that's what we've done. We had that vetting group that involved about 65 campus leaders. We had an advisory committee on undergraduate affairs with 6 different committees that involve about 70 people. Council for Associate Deans with another 10, the Provost Advisory Committee on Student Success with another 15, Proactive Coalition with 120, and I'm not mentioning all of those. My point is, the strategy was essentially coalition building. And it was the coalitions that were really moving the agenda henceforth. Another choice about implementation had to do with the distribution of responsibility. One choice is to create a vertical retention department. And in that case, you attach everything that is retention relevant and then give them the responsibility for producing. Our choice was to disperse responsibility and accountability and ownership as widely as we possibly could across the campus, so as having as many units involved as possible. So let me jump now to 2011. We've been implementing, we have good people in place, we have good strategies operating. We're not complete, we're only about 70% complete, but we're beginning to see the needle move. What we had claimed was that it would be the accumulated effect of all our strategies that eventually would make the major changes. Well, we were beginning to see the needle move. And so in 2011, on that basis of implementing this whole array of strategies, once again, we'll say that we were moving a little farther forward, and we were impressed with our progress. The president was impressed with our progress. The president was so impressed with our progress that the president then, to our somewhat surprise, announced that 70% was not near aspirational enough of a goal. We ought to think about 80%. And in terms of elimination of goals, of any equity gaps, we ought to do that absolutely, with no consideration of prior preparation. So that was at one time encouraging and at another level daunting. So we've been moving from that with new ideas, renewed energy. Evidence of increasing centrality, great attention by our campus leaders to the effort. In addition, we have brand new constituencies involved. We have, for example, faculty leadership very much involved in the student success effort, and Mary Stromberger is here representing that interest. We have students involved in a way that they weren't before. We also have endorsement by our accreditation self-study, very recent. The accreditation self-study made the claim that the student success initiatives have been a primary driver of institutional improvement. And of course, allocation of resources is always evidence of centrality. Even in the worst budget years, when the university was cutting positions, the student success initiatives continued to receive base funding. So with all of that, we would honestly say, with some immodesty, that student success is really now at the core of institutional agendae. It is not the only agenda. We would not claim that for a second, but it's an important part of the university agenda. Now, in the end, has this made any difference? And some quick evidence of that. Over that period of time, we've redesigned about 130 courses through our Institute for Learning and Teaching, and you may have met Mike Palmquist and Gwen Gorzelski here, and we have another 100 on the agenda. We've made a major difference in the level of faculty and staff engagement in mentoring, research, and artistry. We have major changes in student engagement, student visits to our learning programs that are not about remediation, but learning enrichment. We have instances where we have a structured first-year program involving about 500 students, most of whom are first-generation, low-income, of color. But we find that that program has made a 10 percentage point difference in graduation for students as compared with similar students who were not involved. Not only that, we learned that while it makes a difference for anyone, 2 graduation points for the students with the lowest number of risk characteristics, it makes a huge difference, 44 percentage points for those students with the largest the greatest number and extent of risk factors. First-year retention has increased significantly. Academic probation for first-year students has declined from a high of 20% when we started down to 12% these days. We have historic highs in 4-year, 5-year, and 6-year graduation rates. And we've met our commitment. We have eliminated the difference between graduation rates for students of color and non-minority students once we account for academic preparation. So where from here? We get to the even harder issues. Our efforts going forward are much more about faculty, curriculum, and classroom, about college and department, students' academic home, about illuminating student pathways and eliminating equity gaps entirely, and finding better ways to talk about this whole effort. What's worked through all of this, looking back, I would cite 4 things. Leadership is critical, absolutely critical. The role of the president, even in the background, is really important. The role of the original 3 leaders is very important, but it is ultimately the coalition building that has been most decisive. The focus on learning as the central narrative has been critical. The use of data. We have, partly because of our new institutional research director several years ago, Laura Jensen, I can say that the culture has been revolutionized around data. And finally, paying attention to the delivery process itself. How is it that we organize to deliver has been absolutely decisive. So thanks for letting me tell this story, and I'd like to welcome Bette Bottoms.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. Maybe I'm doing it backwards. Yay. I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about the undergraduate student success initiatives at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and also in the city of Chicago at large, helping Chicago's students succeed. Now, why am I the only person having problems? Okay. So, for some background, I want to tell you a little bit about who UIC students are. We have about 17,000 undergraduates at any one time at UIC, and about 3,100 or 3,200 start as new freshmen every year. This is a snapshot of the students that entered in fall 2013. 56% Pell eligible. That's gone up every single year, as you saw at Georgia. 97% are from the state of Illinois, and almost all of them are near the city. 29% are from Chicago public schools. 40% live on campus. Only 44% have a parent with a 4-year college degree. 42% of them work during the school year. 60% grew up in a non-English speaking household. And at UIC, there is no racial majority. UIC is one of the top 10 most ethnically diverse institutions in the entire country. We have 9% African American students, 28% Hispanic, 31% white, 26% Asian, and 6% other. Nice, I'm going backwards. So, how do they do? In terms of graduation rates, I have plotted out the grad rates since 1997. So that's the first point here, all the way over on the left of the slide. What you can see here is that we are on an upward trajectory. In fact, this past year's data showed a graduation rate of 60%. That's up from 30% in 1997. So we have doubled our graduation rates. And the other good news is we have done that without changing the incoming students. The average ACT is the same, the ethnicity is the same, the demographics are the same. So that's very, very good. But what's bad is that it's 60%. It ought to be higher than that. And so we are hoping that we can increase that grad rate. What's also bad about it is that these different lines are the different ethnicities of the students, and you can see that they are not the same. So the last data point I have on there is actually a year ago, but you can see at the top there, Asians, 65%. The next line down is the average tracked with the white students. Then we've got Hispanics at 49% and African Americans at 44%. It's not right. So what are we doing to change that? We've done a number of different things, and one thing I want to point out is our financial aid policy, because finances are so very, very important. We have leveled the playing field with our financial aid policies between students who are Pell eligible and those who are not. They are graduating at about the same rate. That number is averaged across several cohorts. That's why it doesn't average to 60%. So students who come to UIC who are Pell eligible will bring about $5,000 in Pell. They'll also automatically qualify for $5,000 from the state of Illinois. So that's about 10 that they're bringing. Our tuition is now around $14,000 and even higher in some majors. So there's still a gap. UIC makes up the gap completely in tuition for Pell eligible students. So that's an important strategy. Now, as Dean of the Honors College, I can't not comment on the Honors College as a campus best practice model. Many of you probably have honors colleges. You know that they are home to a collection of engaging, high-impact practices, all of which have proven success. What's the outcome of that? We have 1,500 students in the Honors College. They graduate at a rate of 88%. Compared to the campus average of 60%. So the question is, why? And it is not what you think. It is not just because they come to us with higher ACT scores or other indicators. We've done the right multivariate analyses that show that Honors College membership has an effect on graduation and other outcomes over and above all of the factors you could list. Entering ACT, high school grades, AP credits, family finances, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see that visually quite well here, I think. What I've done is, these are the grad rates going up, and across the bottom I have put ACT scores. So over here on the far left, I've got ACT of 21 or 22. There aren't many students in the Honors College with that ACT, but we do have a few. Ranging all the way over to the highest ACTs, all the way up to 36. So what you can see here is a couple of things. First of all, the blue line there is all students at the university except those in the Honors College. The red line on top are the Honors College students. Across every level of ACT score, you see the Honors College students graduating about 25 or 30 percentage points higher. It's not what they come to us with. It's what we do with them once they get to us. Okay, the question then is, how can you give the other 15,000 students an Honors College experience? How do you do that? So, for the last 4 years, we have been engaged in a massive student success planning initiative, very much like the ones that you've just heard about, different in some ways. It began in fall 2011. Provost Lon Kaufman and Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Barbara Henley, convened what's called the Undergraduate Policy Council of Deans. And they were charged by the Chancellor with these goals, coming up with a plan to ensure an 85% first to second year retention rate, a 65% six-year graduation rate, and racial and ethnic parity in those rates. So, what did we do? Here's the process, the structure, and the product of our ongoing plan process. So first of all, an initial draft plan was written in my office. I was the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Affairs at the time. Then an action plan, that went out for campus comment for several months, and then an action plan was written by 8 task forces of over 200 faculty, staff, and students from across the entire university. Those task forces, which are listed here and are the ones you might imagine we'd have, advising, financing college, faculty engagement, and so forth, were convened by the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Affairs, me, and the Dean of Students. And what resulted from that, from their 9 months of work, is called a Strategic Plan for Increasing Undergraduate Success. 1,300 pages and 125 recommended actions. And if any of you would like to see this plan, instead of reinventing that long wheel, hard wheel, you can get it right there. There's the website. You can go and see the entire plan. All right, what do you do with 125 recommendations? How do you implement those? Well, how will we do it? With the help of an APLU Gates Transformational Planning Grant we just got, it's going to help UIC prioritize, plan, implement, and of course assess those recommendations. And I will say a lot of the things are already going on, because once somebody had a good plan, they kept going with it. All right, one centerpiece to everything that we do is research. You have to have the right multivariate data analysis. They have to drive everything, and not simplistic analyses, the right multivariate analyses. 2 years ago, with a $400,000 foundation grant, Lon Kaufman and I started to build a program of research on student success factors. We have built a multivariate model identifying factors predicting student success. When we didn't have the data that we needed to build this, we started doing the research to get those data. So for example, we've done a non-cognitive survey this past year of every single incoming freshman student, to look at motivational and social factors that are related to student success. And we've also done an exit survey. As you might imagine, our preliminary results are showing that finances are the #1 reason our students are dropping out. Other things, the commute, family school balance, family emergency, classes not being freshman friendly, and so forth. But the smart funders that gave us that money said, I'm only giving you that money if you think bigger. So what did we do? We started the Chicago Collaborative for Undergraduate Success, because those funders in the city knew that higher education needed to come to the table in our community to work with many others to increase student success, especially for low income and especially for minority students in the city of Chicago. So what is the Chicago Collaborative for Undergraduate Success? Our mission is to help create a Chicago where all young people live up to their educational potential by raising college graduation rates. The members work collaboratively together to collect and use data to understand how to improve student success. Here's who we are. We now represent 40 colleges and universities. We have 23 associated colleges of Illinois. We have 7 members of the city colleges of Chicago, which are our city community colleges. And here are the rest of us: Columbia, DePaul, IIT, Loyola, Northeastern, Northern, Northwestern, University of Chicago, UIC, and Roosevelt. And we work with many community partners, funders, and nonprofits. And one of our biggest partners is the Chicago Public Schools, or CPS. Why would we want to partner with CPS? One thing I haven't heard a lot about at the meeting, some of course, is that we should be working hand in hand with the high schools. We shouldn't be pointing our fingers back at them and blaming them, and they shouldn't be blaming us for not graduating their alums. Instead, we should be working together. So here's a sobering statistic. Only 17% of Chicago public school 9th graders graduate with a 2- or 4-year degree or even a credential. Well, the Chicago Collaborative for Undergraduate Success can have an impact on this, and these are the data that show you how. So in 2012, 22,000 CPS students graduated high school. Of those, 56% enrolled in college. Of those, over half came to collaborative member institutions. Of those, only 42% graduated with a 2- or 4-year degree. We can have an impact. So here are some examples of initiatives that we have been doing together. The first one there, we're sharing promising practices with each other, all of the collaborative members. We are also working with the city colleges, the 2-year community colleges, to ensure that there is a clean, linear pathway between the 2-year degree and the 4-year degree. We are working as a strong partner with Chicago Public Schools. They came to us and said, okay, tell us what you want from us. What else can we do to better prepare our students? We're about to give them a white paper that tells them what we think. We have a data subgroup, which is a core piece of the collaborative, always working to share data and designing analytic strategies. And one thing coming out of that data subgroup I'm very excited about that we're working on now is we're giving every single Chicago public high school a feedback report. Never have the high schools known how their students are doing when they come to our colleges and universities. We're going to give each high school an individualized report about how their students do, their grades, the percentage of them who need remediation, et cetera, for every single high school, for the students at every single one of the collaborative members. We are also, well, one reason that the Collaborative has had such a good relation with Chicago Public Schools is that we partner with them in leading what's called the Chicago Completion Change Network of Thrive Chicago. Thrive Chicago is a part of the National Strive Network, which is a collective action organization that brings together everyone in a city, funders, schools, nonprofits, et cetera, to work together to increase youth success across a community, and in this case, across the city of Chicago. So with many others, the Collaborative is helping with programs such as these three right here. The first one is accommodating transition coaching, which means bringing very needed coordination to the partnerships that were already happening between nonprofit providers of high school to college mentoring. Senior seminars, which means we're ensuring that universities help CPS develop college prep seminars for high school seniors, and high school counselor credentialing, which is allowing universities and the high schools to work together to develop training curriculum for high school college counselors. I want to say that I think that higher education is generally just not at the table as much as it should be for the tidal wave that's sweeping our country now of these community action, collective action processes that are all aimed at increasing student success from cradle to career. There are some notable exceptions, UMass Boston, for example, and many of your institutions may be collaborating in these kinds of Strive models, but I do not see many universities coming together in a tight, non-competitive collaborative like the one that we have started, which then can effectively join with high schools, nonprofits, funders, and others to make a difference. I think we need to do more of this everywhere because it will make a difference, and it will, if done right, attract the funding to make the work sustainable. Okay, so really the overarching point of that is that increasing student success is not just about your campus. It's also about your entire community. All right, so I'm going to end here with a Chicago icon, Daniel Burnham, who, if you lived in Chicago, would know that he is credited with being the architect and urban planner who brought Chicago back to life after the Great Chicago Fire. And he famously said, "Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood." We all have a lot of work to do if we're going to turn things around and stop this national shame of low college completion rates. And it's very hard work. It is hard work that's going to be welcomed by the enlightened and resisted by others, some below you and some above you. And sometimes not even the best data are going to convince those naysayers, but you need to press on. We all need to think boldly. Lumina has challenged us all to help create a citizenry where 60% of all people have a degree or a credential. There is no sin in committing ourselves to such a tremendous goal and not quite reaching that goal if we did everything we could to try to reach it. There is a sin in not committing to change. Educating more youth, especially low-income and minority youth, it's a moral issue, and it's our moral issue. So to end, I guess I would change Mr. Burnham's sexist statement to be, "Make no little plans, they have no magic to graduate more students from college." Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that you've heard three great stories here of real change going on at three very different institutions. And Tim, I wanted to ask you to start. You know, you've been at this for a long time at Georgia State, and you've seen some impressive progress. How have you sustained the momentum to keep the work, to keep it in front of people? When you start seeing those kind of gains, it seems to me people might want to say, wow, okay, we got there.
In some ways, I think it's just the opposite, that if you can begin to make some small victories, you begin to convert some of the skeptics. I mean, there's not many things that unite the faculty members on our campuses, but one thing is they're all trained to have some respect for evidence. And we've been very aggressive from the start at Georgia State about piloting things and then publicly promoting it to our faculty and staff and showing how it makes a difference. I mean, there are practical implications as well. One thing we didn't touch upon so far this afternoon is the fact that there aren't too many cases where doing the right and moral thing, as Bette was just saying, is also the pragmatic thing. But the calculus at Georgia State is for about every 1 point we increase our persistent rate, that's about $3 million of added annual revenues in tuition and fees and other revenues that the students bring in. So you use those points to rally support, and those who aren't convinced by the moral argument might be convinced by the practical argument. But it is the case that another common thing among the faculty is that they care about students. And if you can show that the efforts are making a difference and serving the students well and you're transforming lives, we found that it's much easier to get buy-in.
So does that moral argument work in bringing faculty along to think about the kids in Chicago public schools and what their experience is going to be like when they reach your doors?
Yeah, this is on, yeah. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's the data, sometimes it's the moral argument. A lot of our efforts have not trickled down to the faculty yet, and that's where our next challenge is. A lot of it is still top-heavy on the administration and staff of the university, but we are beginning to engage the faculty and finding that many, many of them are very interested when told the story. But still the elephant in the room, and it's been in this room for every session I've attended, is how we reward and how we tenure faculty. And so unless at a research institution we're going to do something different at tenure time, I really don't know how we're going to get a whole lot further, at least on the curriculum issues that each of my colleagues talked about.
Right. Paul, you talked about the structure and culture of the institution being an important thing to think about as you move this kind of change forward. How are you thinking about faculty in that context?
Faculty are absolutely at the core, and they have been a part of the efforts to date. But clearly, as we think about the greater objective now of 80% graduation, if we're able to reach that, we will be nearly in a class by ourselves. We aren't going to be able to get that get there in traditional ways, and we'll have to do that in collaboration with the faculty. So we're very fortunate now that faculty leadership has been so active, but we're also concentrating much more on the classroom and on the curriculum. And we have new data tools that help us to do that. We also are needing to find ways to help the faculty know the ways that what they can do is going to be possible and within their means. I think we've learned very clearly that if we ask people to do heroic things, there are a few who will do it. There are others who will not. So one of our tasks needs to be removing the impediments that stand in the way of faculty, doing things that they would be inclined to do if we can smooth the path to doing so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what about students? Bette, you talked about the motivational and social factors and the research that you've done about where students are in this and how we need to reach them and have them think differently about these issues. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we just did the survey. We haven't done the analyses yet, so I don't have the punchline. I can come back next year and tell you about that. But I'm an experimental social psychologist, and the person I hired to work with me on this research is a developmental psychologist. And so we knew that there was a lot to be learned from these social and emotional factors and motivation. So I'm really looking forward to taking a look at that. One thing in some very preliminary analyses, class attendance may fall out as the #1 predictor of the persistence from first to second year. And this is what has been found in research by the Chicago Consortium on School Research for high school students. They found that class attendance by students in the 9th grade was the largest predictor of whether a student graduated from high school. I think we're going to find a huge relationship there. That kind of engagement is very, very important. Now, I've heard some people, however, are likely to say in the academy, we treat our students like adults. They're not children. We wouldn't have an attendance policy like that. And it's really quite sad to hear that. We know in psychology that the brain is developing until age 25. They're not exactly adults at 18 and 19. And I think that some small issues like an attendance policy, we might see the kinds of gains that none of us could even imagine.
I think the research around the student mindset is one of the really emerging, very, very interesting and potentially powerful elements in the student success agenda. Tim, what are you doing there?
Could I just mention that one of the positive things about some of these programs is that they can, in unexpected ways, actually serve to promote some of the kind of motivations that Betty's talking about now. When we started that retention grant program where we're giving these micro grants at the fee drop period, the first couple semesters we had multiple students hanging up on us when our staff called to give free money because the students thought it was a scam. They couldn't believe that anybody from Georgia State would be calling them to give free money. And what we found by meeting and talking to students who have received these grants over the last couple years is that's part of the transformation, is the perception that the university isn't against them, that all the faculty aren't constantly trying to trip them up, and we don't want them to fall out, of step and to drop out. It seems almost silly to have to, try to promote that to a student, but as David was talking about this morning with some of the Texas students who come and feel out of place at UT, when you're dealing with large populations of at-risk students, that can be part of the obstacle, and in some ways, bringing these support programs on the wide scale to the majority of students can begin to combat some of that.
So you mentioned the mindset work. What I did not talk about was that we are, I think, the third campus, in addition to UT Austin and Stanford, working with Greg Walton and Mary Murphy on that. And we did an intervention 3 years ago. We're still seeing, from a one-time intervention, differences in GPA, especially among minority students.
Right. So I think that, we look at numbers a lot. We're driven by the data. You heard data run through all three of these stories, and there are more and more data tools available to us, but it's keeping that focus on the student that I think is really important. And one of the things that I've heard over and over again in the 2 days I've been here is keeping the focus on learning. Do you want to, each of you, comment on how are you doing that within this data-rich, progress-driven culture that you're working in?
I'm still on your last question, so I hope I'll tie it in. One of the things that I think we've learned is that clearly we have to do the things that make it possible for students to attend. So we've restructured financial aid in various ways and so on. But we have, at the same time, learned that students will sustain incredible sacrifices in order to stay at the university when certain things are true, when they feel that they're honored, when they feel that they truly belong, when they feel that there's a clear pathway to completion, and when they are thoroughly engaged in learning. And when those 4 things are true, they will sustain great sacrifices to stay. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want to reduce the sacrifice that's required for them to stay, but at the core of people staying is that engagement in learning. And that learning, as we've talked about throughout the conference, clearly happens as a whole experience. They don't think of themselves as being in class and out of class. They picture themselves as having a life on campus. Blanche Hughes at our campus likes to talk about constructing an environment in which there is simply no escaping learning. You leave class and it's not an escape. You leave class to learn in a different environment. So when students are immersed enough, then all the rest follows: time on task, commitment, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And there really are different models that we need to be exploring, especially as we enroll more and more students who come from non-traditional backgrounds. The transformation in some of our math results, it's not, really surprising when you pause to think about what we had been doing for generations. We were throwing kids in who mostly products of not particularly good public schools into math classes with faculty members at a research institution, not all of whom, and I don't mean to offend anybody in the math departments, but are not the best communicators at times, and expecting them to sit there for 3 hours a week and just pick up from lecture this very complex material. Many students we found were going home, opening their book to do homework, and even if they were sincerely trying to do it, were not able to even to complete the first exercise, and so homework turned into a 15 or 30-second exercise each evening, and a lot of frustration resulted. It's not surprising as we begin to use at scale these adaptive learning programs, not to take out the personal touch at all. In fact, what we found now is that the faculty can interact with the students much more individually because they're doing it in a context where the students have already gotten direct feedback, have had the chance to try exercises, have seen what they understand and seen what they don't understand. And this is a very different way of trying to approach some of these basic introductory classes that we just haven't given enough attention to, and we need to see how that's going to work in other disciplines as well.
Okay, so I'd like now to open it up to you and see if you have any questions for these change agents. You're worn out, I can tell. The end of a long and very energetic and engaging conference. Well, then let's not hold things up anymore. I just want to say how great it is to hear the three of you. I've heard 2 of your stories on more than one occasion, and I'm always inspired anew when I listen to you talk. And Bette, it was great to hear about what the good work you're doing in Chicago. So please join me in thanking our panel.